محمد وآل محمد صلوات. We'll start the program with the recitation of the Holy Qur'an by Sajjad Lalji. Please welcome him with a loud salawat. Ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. فاستجاب لهم ربهم أني لا أضيع عمل عامل منكم من ذكر أو أنثى بعضكم من بعض فالذين هاجروا وأخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا لأكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولأدخلنهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ثوابا من عند الله والله عنده حسن الثواب. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat. I learned from Hussein how to be wronged and be a winner. I learned from Hussein how to attain victory while being oppressed. Hussein ghariba غريب حسين حسين الشهيد الشهيد حسين حسين غريب غريب حسين حسين الشهيد الشهيد Hussein. You are the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad Mustafa, the son of Imam Ali and Lady Fatima, the purest of souls with utmost purity. Yet thousands of so-called Muslims showed no loyalty. They knew you entered the holy cloak by the will of Allah. Yet shroudless they left you on the plains of Karbala. Hussein al-Gharib al-Gharib al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed al-Shaheed al-Hussein. You are the teacher of sacrifice and of charity. You even fed the horses of your enemies. From darkness into light, you set her free. For surely he entered heaven with your mother's handkerchief. But when you pleaded for mighty Asghar, who was just thirsty, an arrow is what they fed to your infant baby. Hussein al-Gharib al-Gharib al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed al-Shaheed al-Hussein, Hussein al-Gharib al-Gharib al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed al-Shaheed al-Hussein. You are the lantern of guidance for all the world to see, the ark of salvation for all of humanity. Those who fought in your light called out your name. In your arms you carried them back till only you remained. Sakina, your daughter, went from crying in your arms to seeing your head on a spear in the court of Sham. Hussein al-Gharib al-Gharib al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed al-Shaheed al-Hussein. You are the root of the branch that Sweet Zainul Abidin, a branch that weakened with what his eyes had seen. He endured the scene of Karbala and held his belief, added to his own suffering no sign of his relief. The sight of women and children tied in chains, and hearing Zainab cry in pain, "Where are you, O Hussein?" Hussein al-Gharib al-Gharib al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed al-Shaheed al-Hussein, Hussein al-Gharib al-Gharib al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed al-Shaheed al-Hussein. No Qasim, no Aun, no Muhammad, no Abbas, no Akbar, no Asghar, you lost them all so fast. Oh Allah, please accept this humble sacrifice. These were the words of our Imam when Asr time arrived. Oh Allah, what has he lost, he who loses you? But oh Allah, what can he lose, he who finds you? Hussein al-Gharib, al-Gharib, al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed, al-Shaheed al-Hussein. You are the savior of Islam, and our faith you did revive. Today we call Ya Mahdi, without him we are deprived. For surely he grieves over tortured beloved, and when we lament the trials faced by Masaib, Ya Mahdi, tonight we vow and we grieve with you. In the light of Al-Hussein, together we'll fight for truth. Hussein al-Gharib, al-Gharib, al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed, al-Shaheed al-Hussein, Hussein al-Gharib, al-Gharib, al-Hussein, Hussein al-Shaheed, al-Shaheed al-Hussein. Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat.
Brothers and sisters, the next part of our program is spoken word by Alia Muraj. Please welcome her with a loud salawat. Ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Brothers, can I ask you to move as far forward as possible so that those who want to join us can join from the back.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As Muharram approaches us and we commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, the poem that I will be reciting today explores how the profound grief of Bibi Fatima holds the entire tragedy of her family woven together like a single sacred garment. Fatima threads her sorrow until it becomes a cloak only heaven can see. Each bead a small eclipse between her fingers. From darkness to light, the names of the Almighty fill her house, and what begins as grief becomes a gathering beneath the kisah. A small room, bright light folding over light, a mother, a father, their children, a prophet whose light illuminates the world. The angels wait at the door. The house breathes with mercy. Their love is written into the fabric of creation. The people beneath this cloak are the light this world was made from, and yet even that light quivers, knowing the shadows that will follow. Every thread she spins knows loss. The cloak trembles in her lap, as though it already remembers what heaven has yet to reveal. She can see it all, the day the Prophet's voice will fall silent, the crowd that will not let her weep, the house that once held light, now darkened by absence. She gathers the cloak around her shoulders. She sits with her tasbih, each bead a small world turning in her hands. Allahu Akbar, the universe reshapes. Alhamdulillah, the stars steady. Subhanallah, a wound begins to close. Every name she utters becomes a new seam in the sky, every breath a mercy written down. Yet still the air grows heavy with what men have done. The world presses inwards, its cruelty finds her doorway. Still she holds the cloak, not as a defense, but as remembrance. When the pain comes, she says nothing, only her lips move, and the fabric absorbs the silence. Part of that cloak, woven from her patience, soaked in her tears, will one day wrap the smallest one, the child she never had. Another will enfold her own light when her breath slows. Ali will carry both into the night, his hands steady, his heart undone. But even buried, that cloak will not be still. It will travel through the years, in the voice of Zainab, in the cry of Hussein, in the trembling handkerchief tied to the forehead of Hur. A thread of it will always remain, a mercy woven through pain, a whisper of her patience stitched into the world. And still somewhere unseen, Fatima threads her sorrow, turning grief into a garment and shelters all those who remember. For Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Thank you very much. Brothers and sisters, the next part of our program is the main talk by Shaykh Mohamed Yasin Devji. Please welcome him with a loud salawat. Ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
In the love of Al-Hussein and all the martyrs and the prisoners after, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali.
Shaykh. Shaykh studied in the seminaries of Qom and Syria for 16 years. He has a BA in Islamic philosophy and mysticism, and his areas of interest include Transcendental philosophy, Islamic mysticism, Qur'anic exegesis, and spiritual psychology. He's continuing his series on Between Wound and Wholeness, building safe communities in the light of the Qur'an and Karbala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you very much. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين لا سيما خاتمهم وأفضلهم محمد مصطفى صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وعلى أهل بيت الطهارة لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين الحجة ابن الحسن أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله روحي وجسمي لك الفداء. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. And hold fast by the covenant of Allah altogether, and be not disunited. And remember the favor of Allah upon you when you were enemies. Then He united your hearts so that by His favor you became brethren, and you were on the brink of a pit of fire. Then He saved you from it, Thus does Allah make clear for you His communications, that you may follow the right way or be guided. Please recite a salawat. Respected scholars, my elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll begin by just recapping briefly last night's talk and then move on to tonight's subject. We called these nights Between Wound and Wholeness. And the question underneath all of them, the main question we talked about is, what does it take to build a community that genuinely holds? A community that is safe psychologically, so a person can bring their real self and heart here. A community that is safe socially, so that belonging does not depend on performing or trying to feel like you have to do certain things to fit in. And belonging spiritually, so that there is room with us to include Allah and become a God-centric community. Last night we started not with solutions, but we started with something more difficult, which was what? Which was identifying the wound that exists within our communities, right? And we did it on purpose. Why? Because the Qur'an begins there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala names out loud in the verse that we just talked about what the wounds are in a community. We named out loud what people in a room like this actually carry. Grief that has never been spoken, exhaustion of the soul, the loneliness that a crowded hall can make worse, questions that have learned to go quiet, and beneath it all along, the wound of a people that has been hunted across history and learned to close rank. We began there again because the Quran begins there. Before our verse speaks of brotherhood, before the verse speaks of bringing hearts together, the Quran speaks of what? وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَى شَفَا حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ. Sorry. وَإِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً. What? When you were enemies. And what does he say after? And you were on the very brink of fire. God himself in the Quran names the wound first. We learned that the word we are reaching for is aman, safety. But not necessarily the safety as we've come to understand it, which is the absence of something. The absence of what? The absence of something hard. The absence of difficulty. The absence of conflict. The absence of anything that can be risky. Our word, rather, aman, shares a root with iman, which is faith, with al-amin, the name the Prophet carried before revelation, the trustworthy one, whose presence you are secure with. Aman is not an absence. We talked about how aman rather is not the absence of a thing, but the presence of a thing. The presence of what? The presence of God. The presence of a godly order. The presence of compassion. The presence of mercy. The presence of kindness. And a life ordered around the sacred so completely that a soul can finally put their defenses down when they enter into this type of space. And then we went on to place the whole series inside the mission of Imam al-Hussein's own charter, which was what? Which was the word Islah, reform, which we refused to flatten into just political slogans and politics. No, we attempted to give it back the multi-dimensions that the word Islah so rightly deserves. One dimension was the vertical, a community's relationship with God. The horizontal, the safety of belonging amongst each other. And the inward, the health of the human heart that makes a person able to keep their commitments at all. And then we ended on the keystone, which was a sentence I asked you to carry yesterday, which is what? Our safety as a community lies in our orientation, vertical and horizontal, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rope comes down from above and we hold it side by side, together, jami'an. So last night was the wound and the brink of the fire. But our verse does not stop at the brink. In that same breath, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. And that He joined your hearts. Tonight, we turn a little bit away from the wound because we will continue to talk about the wounds going forward. But we turn a bit our orientation away from the wound toward the first astonishing word of healing that we find in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides us with. Please recite a salawat. Now I have to be honest with you. Before I began the research on the particular topic I was doing, it was very difficult for me to believe what I'm about the claim that I'm about to make. Because having lived within the community, having grown up within the community, having grown up within the society, and seeing the wound that exists and feeling frustrated that the wound is not being addressed, I found it very difficult to say what I'm about to say to you. But after looking at the verse and doing the research for this, today I make a claim. You might say, Sheikh, you're sitting in idealism, you're naive, you don't know what you're talking about, and that's fine. But there is a basis for it. And what is the claim that I'm making to you? The claim is that a wounded, divided, hostile community can indeed be made whole. I repeat, a wounded, divided, hostile community can be made whole. Not just managed, not kept from open warfare by a careful truce, made whole, turning from enemies into brotherhood. Again, even as I say this to you, I feel that resistance inside my nafs to actually believe this. Is it even possible? Do we really believe this? We look, and let's be honest, when we look around us, sometimes it is difficult to believe when we look at communities, right? We look at the fractures and the wounds within our communities as though they are permanent, right? The family that hasn't spoken in years, two factions in the center who will never sit together, the generational gulf between the generations, right? The old wound between this group and that one. We have very silently and almost, I won't say subconsciously, but subconsciously and consciously, we have made peace with the fractures that exist within our community. We assume simply this is how things are. The Quran, however, is interesting. The Quran sends no such message. The Quran actually flips the whole thing on its head. The Quran, in the verse that we are talking about, actually points to a specific community in a specific city and says, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? He says, look what I did. Look what I did for this community, right? I made people who were killing each other, who were in enmity existentially with one another, and I brought them together and made them whole into a community. Because if we look at it, that is exactly what the first community of Medina was. It's interesting, when we talk about the city of Medina at the time of the Hijrah and afterwards, we label the Madanites as the Ansar, right? The Ansar, almost as though to say that this was one homogeneous group that basically came to receive their brethren, who were the Muhajirin, who were the ones who migrated. But that was far from the case. The Ansar were predominantly made up of two tribes, the Aus and the Khazraj. And they had been at each other's throats for generations, right? This was not just a disagreement. This was a bloody war, right? Feud upon feud, vengeance upon vengeance. Sons buried, avenged, and buried again, stretching back over a century. Even their last great battle before the advent of Islam had left a very, very bitter taste in the mouth of both tribes, right? So when the Prophet comes along, these are not two tribes that don't know each other and just need to be introduced to one another to become friendly with each other. No, not at all. These were enemies, mortal enemies who required disarming at the physical level and at the level of the heart. And about them, these people, Allah says in the verse, إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا. You were enemies, and then He joined your hearts, and by His blessing you became brothers. This is the claim. The most divided people can become one body. And if it could happen to them, then the fracture that we have made peace with in our respective communities is not necessarily permanent either. That is the hope I wish to offer you tonight. But I also want to be honest, because just by saying that communities can come together, I don't want to make it colloquial or cliche, because the Quran itself also does not make it cliche. Please recite a salawat. And here is where most talk of unity goes terribly wrong. We treat the joining of the hearts as something that we ultimately achieve. The conclusion that through our efforts and through our striving and struggling, it is we who ultimately bring about the conclusion of bringing the hearts together. Whether it's through a good program, unity conference, the right subcommittee, and more subcommittees and more subcommittees, reminders to each other to be nice to one another, as if the connection that we're wanting to bring about is some type of project that we undertake, right? And that we manage. And then, when things go wrong, and we are crushed, and when it doesn't hold, when the warmth of the gathering evaporates by the time tabarruk is served or by the time you get to the car park, when old divisions reassert itself by the following day, we are left in despair. The Quran cuts straight through all of this and takes us right to the point. Listen to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to His own Prophet, the most capable human being who ever lived, the greatest leader and the most beloved heart, about how the believers' hearts came together. He says in Surah 8, verse 62-63, هُوَ الَّذِي أَيَّدَكَ بِنَصْرِهِ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم ولكن الله ألف بينهم. It is He, Allah, who strengthened you with His help and with the faithful, and united their hearts. Had you spent all that is in the earth, you could not have united their hearts. But Allah united them together. Sit with this for a moment. Sit with what Allah is saying to the Prophet, the greatest of His creations, the greatest of human beings, the greatest of the ones who does bring hearts together. Sit with that. Allah is telling them, O Muhammad, even you, with all your nobility, with all your wisdom, with all your love, could not have done this if you had spent everything on the face of the earth, all the wealth, all the strategy, all the human effort there is to offer. You could not have joined these hearts, but it is Allah who joined them. Now, for me, when I read this verse, the first thing that came to mind was a humbling, because Allah is serving up a big humbling for us human beings. But interestingly, it's not just the humbling. There's another part to this. The other part to this is that it is incredibly humbling when Allah says that the power to unite hearts rests with Him and Him alone. But the other side of that is also the lifting of a very heavy weight from the shoulders of insan. Allah is humbling you and Allah is humbling us and telling us that yes, I am the one who brings hearts together. But at the same time, He's also saying that that burden and that heavy responsibility I also remove from your shoulders, right? It humbles us because it says the deepest bond between human hearts is not something we can manufacture. It is not a technique. We cannot engineer our way to it, nor buy our way to it, or organize our way to it. The joining of the heart is a godly act. It descends and it is not constructed. And yet, in the very same breath, it lifts a weight, because it means the joining was never resting upon our shoulders alone in the first place. We were never the one who had to make it happen in its conclusion. If we had been carrying the exhaustion of trying to hold a fractured family or a fractured community together by the sheer force of will, the Quran is telling us that was never your job. It was never in your power, and your job, or rather our jobs as humans, is something smaller, not less important, but also much truer. Please recite a salawat.
Brothers, can I ask you to move as far forward? I know it's tight, but there are people waiting outside, so please, if you can move as far forward as possible.
Please recite a salawat. So the question becomes, what is our part? Right? If Allah is responsible for the final destination and for the final conclusion of bringing the hearts together, what is our part as insan, right? If God does the joining, what are we for, right? Here is the way I look at it. God joins the hearts, but He joins them around something and through conditions that we can either provide or we can withhold. Notice that in our verse, the hearts are joined as people take hold of the rope. Keep coming back to this. As people together take hold of the rope. وَأَتَّصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. The joining is not a horizontal first. We talked about horizontal and vertical. It's not horizontally first. They do become brothers. They don't become brothers simply by staring at each other warmly. They become brothers by taking hold of the same rope together, by turning together towards God. The vertical produces the opportunity and facilitates the horizontal. When two hearts both fully turn towards the one, they discover that they in fact have been turned towards each other. So our work is not to manufacture the bond. The bond has already been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our work is to build the conditions in which God's joining can take hold, to put the rope in people's hands, to clear away what blocks them or blocks us from grasping that rope, right? To make our communities a place where turning to God together is actually possible. Everything we will discuss around these nights, how we welcome, how we think of one another, how we repair our ruptures, how we do justice, how we carry the weak, all of it is condition building. None of it is the joining itself, for the joining belongs to Him and Him alone. And this is why the hope of this joining is not cliche. It is not misplaced. It is not lost in my own personal idealism, right? A misplaced hope will say, try harder, be nicer, and you can fix this. The Quran says something far more serious and far more freeing. You, insan, cannot fix this. But the one who can, the one who has done it before, stands ready to do it again. The moment what? The moment we all take hold of the rope together. Please recite a salawat. And so let me say something about how He joined them, because it reveals what our own part really is, right? God did not join the Aus and the Khazraj by handing them 1,000 rulings to agree upon, right? He joined them by giving them one thing to hold together. And this is very important, what the rope was. We're talking about Medina at a time when the Prophet is migrating. Even the doctrine of the faith has not fully taken form, right? But again, what's remarkable is that this was enough to bring Aus and Khazraj together. And they are what? One is the essence and the destination, and the second is the means to reach that destination. And what was that? The essence and the destination that the people were asked to take hold of that rope was what? Was La ilaha illallah. And the means with which to reach that destination and to get to that destination is what? Muhammad Rasulullah. That was the rope. Very simply, that was the rope. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. Tawheed and the means with which to reach Tawheed, which is the Nabuwah and the Risala of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi wa sallam. At that early time in Medina, the vast and beautiful edifice of our tradition, the centuries of the Imam's teachings, the precision of the jurists, the depths of our theology had barely begun to unfold. What turned two blood-soaked tribes into brothers was not complex doctrine, right? They had all mastered. It was the pure trunk of Tawheed and their turning together toward the one who bore it. They became brothers by gripping the essential thing, the rope itself, not by agreeing on every branch that would later grow from that rope. I want to be clear. I am not for one moment diminishing the depth of our tradition. That's not what I'm saying. The depth of our tradition is itself its own mercy. And I would be the last to make light of it. But here, the warning folded inside. The first community was bound by holding fast to the trunk. We who have inherited so much more doctrine, more elaboration, more to be precise and exacting about, right? Have somehow learned that the surplus, not to grip the rope more tightly, but to take the measure of one another and find each other wanting. We have taken the branches, and we have sharpened them into swords against one another. A difference in practice, a disagreement over a secondary ruling, a position on some matter the scholars themselves have differed over for centuries, right? And we are quick, God may Allah forgive us, so terribly quick to cancel, excommunicate, to humiliate, to cast out other clean out of the circle. We have let go of the rope that actually binds us, just to free our hands to push one another away from the rope. And let me name what the rope is not, so there is no confusion. The rope was never our faction. The rope was never our exact opinion. The rope was never our particular way of doing a thing. The rope is Tawheed, and for us. And in these very nights, the rope is bound to the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salam, whom we mourn. To hold the rope is to hold on to our masters. That is what we are commanded to grip. All of us together. And almost everything we fracture over, if we are honest, is not the rope at all. It is a loose thread from our own sleeves, which we have mistaken for the lifeline. Please recite a salawat. You see it, unfortunately, you see it everywhere now. A scholar says one sentence, and within an hour, 1,000 voices have tried to condemn him behind the screen. A family stops speaking over which gathering they attend, which marja they follow, how exactly the ritual should be kept. Walk into any of our cities and you will not find one community, but several, divided down the lines of language, ethnocentricity, origin, so on and so forth, each holding its own rope. Certain the others are either holding the wrong rope or holding the rope incorrectly, right? And the cure is the same cure it always was. Let go of the branch and grab hold of the rope together, jami'an. Please recite a salawat. And there is something very beautiful about the word that the Quran uses for joining, right? It is the verb is allafa, it comes from ulfa, right? The joining of the hearts into intimacy and harmony. I don't want to delve into the linguistics of the word, right? But the scholars have likened it to, they liken it to a fracture or flesh that has been torn that is then put together and mended together in such a way that the mended rib actually becomes stronger than the actual original skin itself, right? So hold that picture, right? Against where we were last night. Last night, the wound, the brink of fire. Tonight, allafa bayna qulubikum, the joining. The same verse that named the wound names the closing of that wound. And the closing is not a covering over, nor a papering over division. It is true mending. Two torn edges, divided flesh, knit by God into one living body again. That is what he did with Aus and Khazraj. He did not make them tolerate each other. He healed the wound between them that until they were one body. Until what? Until the Prophet himself says and would describe the believers that they feel one another's pain as a single body feels the ache of one limb. This is the hope of the wounded community. Not that the wound is denied, no, but that it can be healed, closed by God himself into something whole, and sometimes stronger at the very place that it actually fractured and broke. Please recite a salawat. Those who study how human beings heal have found in their own language an echo of this. They have learned that a frightened, dysregulated person does not calm down through instruction. Right? You cannot lecture a panicked and trembling heart, right, into peace. What settles them is presence. We talked about this. What makes safety, aman, is presence, right? Presence. The steady, regulated presence of another. A calm nervous system sitting near a distressed nervous system, right, lends its own steadiness until the distressed one can find their own footing again, right? They call it, or rather we call it, in my profession, co-regulation. Or we can simply call it in religious terms the mercy of one steady heart being next to an unsteady heart. And this is precisely what a community ordered around Allah is meant to be. A body of steadied hearts, anchored to the rope. So the one who arrives frightened, fractured, barely holding on, finds themselves near enough to steadiness to be able to settle. The community does not fix them. It simply holds the conditions in place. Compassion, mercy, kindness, empathy, that presence, the steadiness, to show that the rope is within reach. And Allah himself then does the joining. Our centers, our majalises are meant to be exactly this kind of place. And tonight is a question for us to ask, honestly, whether they are or whether they aren't. Please recite a salawat. And it's not that we don't know how to do this. It's situationally we do this, right? For example, look at this gathering today. People have come together. People have come together in the love of Imam al-Hussein, in the love of Allah, in the love for one another, to come, to sit together, to be with one another, to hold each other in the commemoration of the tragedy. And this is indeed one of the blessings and the miracle in the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein. But what Imam al-Hussein perhaps is asking of us is that when we come and gather and are able to do this in a situational manner, it is also on us to allow it to grow beyond the gatherings, beyond the time of Azah, beyond our circles and beyond our comfort zones. Tonight, we have spoken of hearts that God joins so completely that two enemy tribes became one body. But tonight, I want to leave you with the highest proof of ta'alif al-qulub that this world has ever seen. A community of hearts so joined that not even the certainty of death could break them apart. When Imam al-Hussein reached the plains of Karbala, he did not hide what was coming. He gathered the joined hearts around him, his family, the children, Zainab, his loyal companions, and he told them plainly, "Here our blood will be spilt." He walked that desolate earth and marked their graves one by one. He purchased the very ground in which they would be buried, a man choosing the resting places of those he loved the most. And they stayed. Hearts that the world could not have joined for all the wealth on earth. Joined by what? Joined by Allah, for they all took hold of the rope together, jami'an. Stayed, and they stayed whole beside him, on the very ground of their death. Let us go with him now to that arrival, to the land of grief and trial. The sun hung low in the sky as the weary caravan passed onward. The desert winds blew soft that day, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Dust clung to the hooves. Silence clung to the hearts. After a long journey marked by hardship and divine resolve, the standard of Imam al-Hussein came to a halt. Imam al-Hussein arrived in Karbala on Thursday, the 2nd of Muharram, in the year 61 after Hijrah. He dismounted slowly, looking out over the plain, dry, desolate, and untouched by time. There was no shelter there, no welcome. Yet something in the wind told him this was the place. He looked towards the horizon and asked, "What is this land called?" They replied, "It is called Ghadiriya." He asked again, "Does it have another name?" They said, Shattil Furat. Then he said, "Is there another name?" They said it. It is called Karbala. The moment the word passed their lips, Karbala, his eyes welled with tears. He said, "O Allah, I seek refuge with you from Karb and Bala. This is a land of grief and tribulation." The companions grew still, even the wind grew quiet. He took a few steps forward, his sandal pressing into the dust. Then he looked towards his family, towards Zainab, toward the children, toward the brave companions, and he said, "Here is the place where our blood will be spilled. Here is where our children will be slaughtered. And here is where our women will be taken captive." It was not the voice of despair, but the voice of certainty, the kind of certainty only prophets and their inheritors possess. He then called the leaders of the local Banu Asad tribe and purchased the land. "We are the family of the Messenger of God. We will be killed here and buried here. When our heads have been severed, our bodies lie upon this plain. You must bury us in this land." He assigned specific graves. He walked the earth and marked the resting places of his sons, his companions, and finally his own. A man choosing his own grave. Zainab watched in silence. The pain in her chest surged like a storm. One of the young girls asked, "Uncle, are we going to build a home here?" He knelt to her, tears veiling his gaze, and said, "No, little one, we have come here to give our lives." That night, the sky above Karbala remained cloudless, but the stars trembled. The moon did not rise, or if it did, it could not bear to look. And the earth, that cursed holy earth, awaited the blood of the best of creation. When Hussein reached Karbala, a dust-worn banner kissed the sky as Hussein approached with lower eye. The second morn of Muharram came, and with it, grief too great to name. He paused his steed on the desert sand and softly asked, "What is this land?" "Al-Ghadiriya," came the call. "Shattil Furat," then after all. "It's Karbala," the tribesman said, and at that name, he bowed his head. "O Lord," he cried with breaking breath, "I seek refuge from grief and death. This is the place, I know it well, where angels weep and devils dwell." He walked the ground with solemn pace and marked each martyr's final place. "Here I will fall, and here my kin. Here ends our trial, here it begins." He bought the land with heavy grace. He saw his grave in that cursed place. To Banu Asad he softly pled, when we lie slain, to bury our dead. Zainab stood still, her eyes rimmed red. She knew too well what lay ahead. A child tugged gently at his robe and asked, will we make this our abode? He bent and kissed her tearful cheek. No home but heaven shall we seek. The wind turned cold, the camels cried. Even the sun turned back and sighed. For Karbala had now been found, and all of heaven kissed that ground. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawm al-zalimin. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas samiul alim. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ya Bab Dilla, Ay Shaheed Karbala, Badshah Nainaba, Ay Zabi hai bekhata. Hussain minni wa ana min al-Hussain, 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 Hussain minni wa ana min al-Hussain.
وجنون ونال وعشق وسجود मौला मेरा
Your head in sujood and said, this is the promise that I had made. Not every drop of blood I would shed. For you, my Lord, I would give my hand. I am coming back to you, Allah. Accept this deed in Karbala. A voice came from up above afar. Come back, O Nafsul Mutmainah.
زيارة. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي محمد بن عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك وعلى زوجة الوفية الغراء خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين. السلام عليك وعلى ابن عمك أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب رسول رب العالمين. السلام عليك وعلى بضعتك الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك وعلى ولديك الإمامين الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك وعلى أئمة المسلمين من ذرية ولدك الحسين علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والحجة ابن الحسن المهدي. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا صاحب الزمان عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أنصارك وأعوانك والمستشهدين بين يديك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. فصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى الطيبين الطاهرين.
Brothers and sisters, just a reminder that tomorrow, inshallah, we'll continue with our series, continue with our programs at 7:30 p.m. Tomorrow being Thursday, we'll also start with the children's program, which starts at 7:15. So if your children have registered for that, please make sure you join at about 7:15. We'll have an extended question and answer session with Shaykh Mohamed Yasin Devji on Saturday, inshallah, after the main section of the program. Ashura, inshallah, will be on Friday, 26th of June. The program will start at 10:30. And also to let you know of our regular programs, please do join us every week on Fridays. We do have regular talks. The Friday after Ashura, inshallah, on Friday 3rd of July, we'll have Dr. Ashfaq Khalfan, who'll be speaking to us on who should pay for addressing climate change.